This morning, is it finally time for Texas to give driving permits to undocumented immigrants? State Rep. Ramon Romero explains why it would make the state safer for police and the public. The town in Texas where there is no wait list for the COVID vaccine, and people are even driving in from out of state to get it. We'll talk to the county judge about what is being done differently. Believe it or not, D.C. is doing things. Congress has a group of problem solvers, bipartisan, and a Texan is on the team. We'll talk to Plano Republican Van Taylor about his role and more. And Senator John Cornyn holding hard against convicting President Trump in his impeachment trial. Is this solely, though, about trying to keep Trump's voters in his corner? Something we're going to discuss.
Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley starts now.
Good Sunday morning to our viewers across the state this morning. Before we get to our guests, let's first get you caught up on some of the biggest political headlines in Texas. The first is a question. Will Beto O'Rourke make a political comeback? The former congressman told an El Paso radio show that he is considering a run for governor. Greg Abbott is up for re-election next year. Candidates have to start lining up donors and organization right now, though. And many have wondered which Democrat might actually challenge Abbott. Well, 4 Texas Democrats say President Biden is going too far with at least one of his executive orders. Democratic Representatives Mark Vesey from Fort Worth, Lizzie Fletcher from Houston, Vicente Gonzalez from McAllen, and Henry Cuellar from Laredo all sent Biden a letter. They want him to rescind his executive order that stops oil and gas leases on federal lands and in federal waters. The Democrats said the order will eliminate jobs and cause the U.S. to rely on other countries again for oil and gas. And here's a smile for you this Sunday morning. Forget all those memes. Bernie Sanders at the inauguration is now a piñata. ABC party headquarters on Davis Street in Dallas started making these a few days ago. They cost $100, or if you want Bernie and the chair, it's $150. This is the same store that made the Trump piñatas a few years back and actually still does. Let's begin, though, in Washington, D.C. and talk about 2 words not often associated with national politics: problem solvers. There's a group of Republicans and Democrats that's little known outside of Washington, which works together to find common ground. And one of the members of that group is Congressman Van Taylor, a Plano Republican serving his second term right now. Congressman, good to see you.
Great to be with you, Jason.
Let's talk about something we haven't heard a lot in D.C., and that is problem solving. You're a member of this Problem Solvers Caucus. We haven't addressed it on this program. I know you've been around for 3 or 4 years, but tell me what the caucus is doing and whether you think it's actually made a difference.
Sure. Well, the Problem Solver Caucus is a caucus of today 56 members of the U.S. House, half Republican, half Democrat. We have started, we've basically built a Senate chapter. They call themselves the Common Sense Caucus over in the Senate. And that's actually 8 Republicans and 8 Democrats. And we are meeting regularly and discussing important issues. And really the CARES 4 package was really the result of that bipartisan bicameral discussion. It's very important that when you come up with a solution, it's not just working in your chamber, it's got to work in both chambers and be acceptable to the executive. The hard work that was done in the fall, we announced the bicameral bipartisan CARES 4 package actually right after the election. It was actually passed into law before Christmas. So that was very proud of the reaching across the aisle, getting things done and trying to solve real problems for Americans.
You obviously have a reputation for that. Let me ask you about CARES and a follow-up to any stimulus that might be out there, because a lot of Texans are wondering, will there be more stimulus? Former President Trump and now President Biden, they want the additional $1,400 added to the $600 the House has already passed. Do you see that happening? And if so, when?
Obviously been in discussions with Republicans and Democrats in the House and with senators, Republicans and Democrats, and actually the White House over the last week. And I think you're really going to have to see a more targeted approach, sort of a let's send everybody a check. I've actually, believe it or not, gotten complaints in my district. Hey, why am I getting a check? I haven't gotten a pay cut. My hours haven't been hurt. I actually got a raise. I got a bonus. Things are actually good for my family. This isn't right. And you have to appreciate that sense of, hey, let's help people that need help. And that's certainly where I am. And so I think we need to be thoughtful and targeted in how we think about aid, rather than just sort of blasting it out and knowing that we're sending too much money to people that don't need it and not sending enough money to those who really need it.
Right. How long might that take, though, to figure that out, to solve that problem?
Well, we're working on that as we speak, and so you're watching Republicans in the House and the Senate sort of say, hey, let's target it more. And then you're seeing some Democrats sort of quietly discussing with the White House, hey, let's try to target this. Let's try to take the price tag down to something that we can all afford. I mean, because remember, we're borrowing that money. We're going to get that back one day. It isn't free. And so to think, hey, we're just going to spray aid out and it'll all be fine, don't worry about it, I think is irresponsible.
I want to ask you about moving forward, because you're widely seen as somebody who's kind of a middle-of-the-road type of a guy. The FBI just a few days ago put out that warning of about potential violence from domestic extremists. I'm curious how you think the country moves forward from here, especially after what we saw in D.C. this month.
Sure. Well, let me first say I condemn political violence on the left and the right. This is not the way that our country should solve problems. We have a political process to solve problems. We have a democratic republic. People can vote for their representatives and then send them to go discuss and hash out those issues. I think that there are certainly some very raw wounds right now, around this country and in Congress. And I'm certainly working to try to bind those wounds up, because there are important things that we need to do as a country to come out of this pandemic and rebuild our economy.
Politically speaking, too, Congressman, former President Donald Trump, he's really kind of become a wedge inside the Republican Party. Some people, like Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, suggested that it's time that the GOP moves on. But many Trump supporters are not ready for that. How do you think this is going to end?
Well, look, you've had former presidents since George Washington. And they have an influence in the country's future, and over time that influence fades, and as that's just the course of time. And so I think that you're going to continue to see President Trump be a very influential figure within the Republican Party for years to come. But I think that different issues and different challenges are in front of us, and we're going to address those as best we can as a nation.
All right, Congressman, it's always good to talk to you. Thanks for the time.
Great to be with you, Jason.
Getting anything done in Congress right now, though, will be delicate. Why? Well, in the House, Democrats have a very narrow majority and really can't lose any votes. In the Senate, Chuck Schumer and Mitch McConnell haven't worked out a power-sharing agreement. So let's go to D.C. and see what this might mean to getting anything meaningful done in the first 100 days of the Biden administration, or beyond that, maybe. Abby Livingston here is back with us. She's the D.C. bureau chief for the Texas Tribune. Good morning to you, Abby.
Good morning.
With the situation so delicate in Congress, what might this mean to President Biden and his hopes for things like immigration reform, a bigger stimulus, et cetera?
Well, he doesn't have a lot of room to negotiate, but President Biden is a creature of the Congress and the Senate. And so if there's anybody who can move things through, it's him. The question is, can it be moved? I think immigration is going to be a very difficult lift. And the stimulus and the COVID relief package, it's probably going to be the creature of compromise.
And a creature of Congress he is after all those years. But we are, a week and a half or so into the Biden presidency. Biden is already burning through ink barrels, signing all the executive orders. And his big name cabinet appointees are also moving through pretty smoothly through the Senate. Is this a new day in D.C., or is this just the honeymoon period with a new president?
It feels very, very different. I've only been here a few days, but back from Texas. But there absolutely is a different feel. There is a feel of the government moving, trying to get it going. But the question is specifically with COVID, can it move fast enough? And we don't know the answer to that question right now based on the science of this virus and the wheels of Congress. Yeah.
All right. Abby, back to you in a moment. Something we'll be watching. Coming up, is it finally time for Texas to give driving permits to undocumented immigrants? State Rep. Ramon Romero explains why it would make Texas safer for police and for the public. And the Texas town that has no waiting list for the COVID vaccine, even accepting people who are driving in from out of state. We'll talk to the county judge when we return. You're watching Inside Texas Politics. Texas has talked about this next issue before, driving permits for undocumented immigrants. The legislature will consider that again this session, how it can make the state safer for police and for the public. State Rep. Ramon Romero says it's time for Texas lawmakers to take a closer look at this finally. He's a Democrat from Fort Worth. Representative, good to see you. Thanks for the time.
Glad to be with you, Jason.
Let's talk about this bill. It's House Bill 1058. It essentially says undocumented people living in Texas would have to take a driver's ed course, but not the driver's ed test is the way I read the legislation. Explain this for us. What's the rationale behind it?
Well, I think that we have somewhere between 1.5 to 2.5 million undocumented people driving our streets today without the ability to even identify themselves, and certainly not ever taking a driver's course. We want to make sure that if they're driving on our streets, that they've had that opportunity. And we're really thinking about the police officers that might at some point pull that person over. What's their life like? What is their initial reaction when someone says, I don't have a driver's license and I really can't identify myself? I think that's a public safety issue with everything that police officers have to deal with today. That's one of the things that I think we can eliminate. You know, and my heart goes out to all those fathers that are going out either to drop off their daughter or son at a school, and they see a police officer and they just get nervous with fear that they're going to get pulled over and that they might not be able to come back and see their family that evening. So they live in fear. Police officers have some fear when folks aren't able to identify. And all Texans pay when you think about, all of us know what uninsured motorists are.
Right.
So just because they can't identify, we've got so many that are uninsured right now.
You've introduced this before. It hasn't passed over the last couple of sessions. What makes you think that this session might be any different and you might have any more luck on it?
Well, number one, Dade Phelan was chair of state affairs last year, and he was very open and willing to listen to the legislation. He gave me a good hearing on it. Time ran out. Now he's Speaker of the House. I believe that he's a different type of speaker. He's a young man that knows he wants to continue to drive the Texas economy. Look, without a doubt, Texas construction workers drove the Texas economy throughout this pandemic. Essential workers have kept us going at great risk to themselves. A lot of those folks are these exact same folks that haven't been able to identify. This is a public safety issue. I've talked to him about it. He seems open to the idea of at least hearing it again, making sure that it gets heard. And, you know, you never know. This might just be the year that, you know, attitudes change, and I'm hoping it is.
I want to ask you completely a different topic, expanding Medicaid. We've talked to State Senator Nathan Johnson, a Dallas Democrat, about that as well, too. There seems to be some indication that there might be some traction or some movement on that this session. There's already, you know, Republicans have always said that, you know, we don't think it's done right. It's going to end up costing Texas. But now other Republican states have already expanded Medicaid. Will that happen here this session?
Well, I think a true fiscal conservative would say, I'm not going to continue to send billions of dollars to Washington and not expect to get some of that in return. This is all going to be, I believe, in the end, in the hand of Governor Abbott. He has never been a fan of Obamacare. It's the Affordable Care Act. It keeps people healthy. We have 18.4% of Texans that are uninsured. This COVID pandemic is causing an amazing bill to every single one of us Texans that are paying taxes here. It just makes sense. I'm glad that during the election season in November, Republicans were warming up to the idea of getting those dollars back. Now we just need them to act. So let's hope that they, you know, put their money where their mouth is and, you know, do the walking after they did the talking.
All right. A lot to watch for this session. Representative Ramon Romero, good to see you.
Thank you for having me on, Jason.
Our state's COVID vaccine rollout is not going anywhere near how many had hoped. Supply can't keep up with demand, but one Texas town has no waiting list and even giving shots to people who drive in from out of state. We're talking about the Texas Panhandle. What is being done differently there? Well, we called the Potter County Judge Nancy Tanner in the most recent episode of our political podcast called Y'all-itics. Hey, we fully expected to give you a call and to think that, and to hear maybe that things weren't going too well with the vaccine distribution in Potter County and in Amarillo, but that's just the opposite of what you told us.
You would have been very wrong. Yeah, we are doing so good that I swear people are calling us just to ask us how we're doing it. You know, we have such a good City of Amarillo Health Department that just took hold of it and just said, we're going to do this, and it is getting done.
All right, so can you bottle that? What is the magic for any other county officials who are listening around Texas?
I don't know if there's any magic involved with it. I think it's just good organizational skills and knowledge of what needs to be done. And I haven't yet quite figured out how they're getting so many vaccines here, but we are. And we've administered about 25,000 so far.
Wow. And so how much of the population is that there? Obviously, it's only a fraction of the population, but
not that much. If you look at it that way, if you break it down, it's not that much, but we're still getting more. And so we anticipate that they will continue to show up at the Civic Center, at the Veterans Hospital, at the two other hospitals we have, their own doctor's offices and what all to get this vaccine. And it's working. It's working for us.
Judge, we've been seeing a lot of waiting lists, especially in some of the larger counties. Collin County, for example, really stands out for a long waiting list for people who are eligible to get the vaccine right now, but just can't seem to track it down. Have you all experienced anything like that? Do you have people who are sitting on a waiting list at this point?
We do not. And I really don't know why. I've contacted the mayor and the health department today to ask them that very question, and I haven't heard back from them. So we're not having a waiting list at all.
Do you have concerns about that, though? Do you have concerns that you might get people from other counties there in the Panhandle, or heck, even people driving in from not too far away Colorado or Oklahoma?
We've already had that. We've already had it. And we're not turning them away. There's no way we would turn them away. They've come from New Mexico, Oklahoma, Colorado. We'll take them. So, open arms.
well, good on you for doing that. Yeah. Maybe it's saving some lives.
I sure hope so.
So the COVID vaccine is only part of the puzzle in ending the pandemic. Contact tracing is another. No one wants the government really tracking them, but a New Zealand company, it's figured out another way to do it successfully, and this company is moving to Texas to set up shop. We just put this podcast out a couple days ago. You can hear it and Judge Tanner there. If your phone is handy, aim its camera at the QR code on your screen. It's going to take you directly to our latest episodes. Our podcast is called Y'all-itics. New episodes every Tuesday, sometimes twice a week. Check it out wherever you get your podcasts. Well, more to get to into this program as well. Senator John Cornyn remains a staunch defender of Donald Trump. Is this all about him trying to keep Trump's voters in Cornyn's corner? Something we'll discuss next on the Roundtable.
This is Inside Texas Politics with Jason Whiteley.
Time now for Reporters Roundtable to put the headlines in perspective. Abby Livingston is back with us from D.C., the Texas Tribune bureau chief there in D.C. Bud Kennedy joins us each week, a columnist at the Fort Worth Star-Telegram. And, of course, Bernadine Steptoe, political producer at WFAA in Dallas, is here. And, Abby, let's start with you and the vaccine rollout. It's been a mess here in Texas, a mess everywhere. The Houston Chronicle just put out the other day that it shows that Texas ranks 49th of 50 states in vaccine distribution per capita. So the question we ask on this program quite often is there any political fallout? Who is to blame for this politically?
Well, I think part of the blame falls with the federal government. I went through this in Tarrant County with my parents. This is one of the most single stressful experiences I've ever had trying to get them registered, dealing with the technology and the bureaucracy. And it also falls on local officials, but they can only work with the guidance of the federal government. And so that's a real question to be asked, and that's the test of Joe Biden over the next several months.
That's a good point, Bud, because at the end of the day, it probably does stop with the federal government, but it seems like the state and the county should have some playbook to begin with and to adapt to, right?
Well, during the Trump administration, the state was unwilling to blame the federal government because they didn't want to antagonize the president. Now the state will blame the federal government for everything. But the state and the county in particular, that's where the blame lies for the lack of communication and particularly the lack of outreach to minority communities. When you put your vaccine site in Hearst and then you look at the chart and everybody from Colleyville's got their vaccines, but the poor people in Fort Worth haven't, it shouldn't be a surprise. They set up a sign up where you had to sign up on a computer using Chrome. This is not the way it should work.
Yeah, and like you said, Bernadine, wealthier zip codes we have seen especially in some parts of our state. They've been getting the vaccine first. Lower income zip codes have not. That really creates more of a question and debate about racial equity, doesn't it?
Well, it does, but it also shows that you have the wealthier communities and zip codes that have access. They have internet access. They have access to information more so than those who are in the less populous or less income areas. So it just shows that how not only with the vaccine rollout, but with COVID-19 period, there have been some problems with how those people of color, they're getting access. So that's a lot of the problem. And I think that the problem is with all levels of government, federal and local, county, city, all of them.
Well, let's talk about one of those levels and one of our representatives in D.C., Abby, Senator John Cornyn. He was super quiet, especially on social media, as you probably know, for the last 4 years. But now he's pretty active again with Biden in the White House. But he seems to be taking a real hard line and really defending Donald Trump in the impeachment trial. Any of this surprise you at all?
Not entirely. I think there were a few days after the attack on the Capitol where we weren't quite sure where Republicans would land because this was so close to them. It was their lives in danger. But we have seen Mitch McConnell, Cornyn's effective leader boss, move in that direction, and Cornyn usually goes that way. That said, he has played ball with Biden on some things, and he's been confirmed several major appointees in the last week. This goes to show Cornyn is one of the least politicians from Texas I'm least inclined to predict where they go.
Bud, just a few moments left here.
Well, I think the Republicans want to put Trump in the rearview mirror, but keep his voters on board, so they want to show they'll fight. Yeah. They want to get past this impeachment.
Bernadine, final word.
Well, and he's showing leadership. He is the senior senator from Texas, and he's just showing leadership.
All right, guys, thank you so much. We appreciate the time. Thank you for watching as well. We're back again next Sunday to take you inside Texas politics. Hope to see you then.